Welcome to the third day in our Marine Economy Week of events. So hope you've all been enjoying it so far. Those of you that have had a chance to make it to other events earlier this week. My name's Jamie Watt. I am a partner at Harper McLeod, and I lead the IP and technology group within the firm. Today, we're going to be looking at innovation, and with me is Hannah Mertens, COO for Aquapharma, who are a leading veterinary services provider for the aquaculture industry. They design and develop solutions for fish and shrimp health globally, operating in 8 countries with around 50 employees across the world. So welcome, Hannah.
Thank you,
Good
Jamie.
to see you. We've worked together on a number of different projects. So I know you're a business which is open to innovation and quite involved in innovation. And we thought it would be useful to have a chat with you about your take on the sector at this point in time. I think, first of all, could you tell us a bit about your background for the benefit of everyone attending?
Yeah, sure. So as you say, I'm the COO of Aquapharma Group, international company. I am relatively new to aquaculture. I started actually right in the pandemic. So that was unfortunate timing. And before Aquapharma, I was actually part of Solvay. I don't think that really rings a bell for the audience, but Solvay is a leading materials and solution provider in the chemical sector, and they're actually also shareholder, 50% shareholder of Aquapharma Group since 2019. And prior to that, I worked in the pharmaceutical industry. So I have a background in biochemistry and bioengineering. I'm Belgian, living also in Belgium. So yeah, I think in a nutshell, that's me.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. I know you've got a degree in biochemistry and bioengineering, but you also did a business leadership course and training in Switzerland.
Indeed, yeah.
Has that been very helpful, the business leadership element in kind of finding out how to apply the scientific side in a commercial environment? Is that something which was useful?
Yeah, and I think, we have to work for a very, very long time. And I really believe in this continuous development. And after a few years, I felt like, okay, let's develop myself. And apart from all the tools and the strategic frame that is provided, it is also the networking with other professionals from other sectors. And it's really very inspirational. And it gives you a good dose of motivation to go and bring new ideas to reality. So I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I recommend it to everyone if you have the opportunity to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I know when I used to be intellectual property advisor to Heriot-Watt University, and one of the things that we started doing there was to bring a kind of legal and commercialization innovation training into PhD courses in chemistry and things like that, because it was a really useful skill to bring to people who are creating, vaccines and pharmaceuticals, to understand how patent rights and trademark rights work and how you do contracts. It was a very useful interface with that. So I know it's something whenever we get a chance to work with academia that we do kind of impress upon them the use and benefit of that. So could you tell us a bit more about Aquapharma and the aims of Aquapharma and their background?
So I think Aquapharma, through the vision, but mostly also through the research, we really, I feel, contribute to responsible aquaculture practices and our new tagline is actually welfare below water. So that's really, really what we want to do. So whether it's fish, salmon, or shrimp, now more recently, that is absolutely our ambition, to improve the welfare by either preventing, if we can, or controlling disease. So the story of Aquapharma started years ago in 2009, 2010, at the time with the introduction of the development of a new concept for sea lice treatments, which is now well known in Europe and also in Chile, Canada. And then now, after that, the company also introduced mechanical treatments on top of the tarpaulin treatments that the concept that they had developed. Now also these mechanical treatments, and very recently now we're doing business development to develop a concept for precision farming in ponds, starting with shrimp farming. And as I mentioned, maybe that's also important to know, we're actually part of a larger ecosystems with two parent companies, so 50-50 owned by Aquatic, Norwegian food safety leader, and then you have Solvay, as I mentioned, the global chemical concern.
Yeah, that's. I mean, it's really interesting to know about the structure and the involvement of Aquatic and Solvay, because they each play quite significantly different roles, but in the one sector and the one chain to bring things from concept to market, certainly. So it's really useful, I think, in any business to have that kind of collaborative approach where you pull in the right people for each part of, developing, your product to take it right through to market. The other thing that I've always found interesting about your business has been, it works around innovation, but you've got a particular focus on emerging markets. I find working in innovation in emerging markets challenging, but really interesting at the same point in time, whether it's dealing with, IP strategy, competitor interference, IP infringement, or working with government. Challenges are fun. I mean, I suppose, and it's a great feeling to kind of solve them, and find a way through. What challenges have you encountered in building the business for Aquapharma?
Well, of course, I wasn't there when the Aquapharma story started, but and this is then from my perspective, the first challenges that the company had were really making sure that there was a security of supply for the offer that Aquapharma had, and this is the sea lice treatments. Aquaculture sector in general is quite, I think, unpredictable. There's a lot of parameters that you cannot control, whether it's biology or weather, so there is a level of unpredictability, and if a farmer needs to treat, then you need to be ready. So that was really the very first challenge, in making sure that the organizations in all these different countries, in these remote locations, that we had that in place to make sure that we can always deliver on when needed. And I wasn't part of the organization, but I can only say that in every country that we have, so in the main salmon countries, the team has done a great job in doing exactly that. With seasonal fluctuations, that has been a great accomplishment. So that would be either the first challenge that Aquapharma has had. A more recent challenge is actually a positive story is turning a little bit, I would say, sour, is where this new treatment concept and these bath treatments for sea lice that Aquapharma developed together with Solvay, they were so successful in Europe and Scotland and Norway that they were probably used too much with not enough rotation. And so, of course, then you have the biology, and as with all treatments, sea lice developed resistance. So also for our concept, and so there is partial resistance, which is a big challenge. But that brings then new challenges as innovation, and so this, Jamie, but we have European recognition and funding for a consortium innovation project for which we partner with a tech startup company Pulsea, ourselves, and Norwegian university, NTNU. And so we're trying actually to reposition our concept to overcome the sea lice resistance on the one hand, but then at the same time also further improve the environmental footprint. And then finally, I think the most recent challenge is COVID. The pandemic was quite a challenge. For the existing business, I have to say I was impressed with what we were able to do, even often remotely. We kept going, and we had actually a good 2 years. So I was really very much impressed by our organization. For new business and business development, also in emerging countries, when the country is locked and you cannot go there and you cannot visit, that was challenging. So in business development, we suffered from some delays. But we're trying to catch up on some of that now, and we'll go in full speed now that countries are open.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we've always identified, and investors always identify, is having the right team and the right people, to take innovation forward to market. You can have the greatest idea, but if the wrong people are involved, it isn't going to go anywhere. They're often investing in the personnel rather than, the innovation. I think the pandemic certainly brought that to the fore, because it is harder to work remotely than it is to work in person with all the normal availability of travel and visiting people and discussing things. So, it has been certainly a test of teams we've found across a number of businesses in that period. I think it'll be interesting to see how that opens out. Now we're starting to lose some of the restrictions. It's interesting times, certainly. Now, I know we've worked together on a number of innovation projects, and Aquapharma are very open to innovation. How receptive do you think that the aquaculture sector generally is to innovation? Are they quite open, or is it quite stifled and staid and stuffy? It's probably the best way to put it.
Yeah, I find the sector extremely open to innovation, and it is still a fairly young sector as well, and you really feel that there's this dynamic and drive. I don't know if it's really to catch up, but to continuously improve. And so you see so many initiatives, so many startups as well. Investors are also very present. So I really find it a very dynamic sector compared at least to the previous, like the big pharma sector where I was part of, and then also the chemical sector. It's fast moving.
Yeah, no, I mean, we've certainly seen in the past, clustering in certain areas in kind of chemistry and life sciences, medical devices, particularly in around Belgium and Switzerland, east coast of the US. I think with the pandemic, we've maybe lost a little of the need for kind of physical clustering, which is helpful, because it's very useful to have that kind of a level of ecosystem around a particular area to help take things forward. In Scotland, we do, from a research perspective, see strengths in certain cities and a good level of academic representation, particularly in Edinburgh. And I think that's bringing in some interesting interactions. I always give as an example the investment that's gone into Edinburgh into data sciences. And data analysis is relevant to so many different areas, but the cross-collateralization you get from people in energy or aquaculture or medical devices interacting with data scientists, it really helps product development in a number of ways, both to inform how that goes forward. The other bit I really like is, and I think it comes from the software field, data scientists are quite quick at doing things because you can do it on a laptop. Yes. And that speed of development is really fun, and really interesting. As regards R&D, do you find aquaculture yourself to be a fast-moving field, or is it something where everything's quite well established?
No. As I said, I think it's fast-moving, and Yeah, I said, yeah, it's fairly young. So these trends that we've seen in agriculture around sustainability, you see that now in aquaculture, but very much faster. Trying to integrate the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. You alluded to it, the big data. I hear. Accelerator here, AI accelerator there. There's so much happening and so many promising initiatives. It's very interesting to see all that.
Yeah, I mean, we live in a changing planet. You mentioned sustainability there. I was reading, a couple of days ago about the possibility of the whole of the Mekong Delta in Vietnam being fully underwater in about 10 years' time, which a lot of, aquaculture is coastal. So, I mean, the changing planet, particularly climate change, I'm guessing is a fair challenge, for the area, the sector generally. What challenges are you seeing in aquaculture generally? I mean, what are people looking to what are they going to have to deal with going forward?
Yeah, I think it's also related to the sustainability and the planet that we have. An increasing world population, and we will be 8 billion people, and there is increased interest and demand for healthy protein, so salmon, fish, shrimp. The problem is, if we want to follow this demand, then the capacity needs to increase. So more farms, more fish or more shrimp in these farms, you will naturally have more disease, develop more issues. So just for Europe, for example, I think the European aquaculture sector will not be able to meet that demand for more healthy protein if we then companies like Aquapharma, but many others, if we can't come with new methods or improved methods to prevent disease and control the disease. So that's really, it has to go hand in hand, that is really a big challenge where we all have in the sector all together have our responsibility.
Yeah. Okay. So as a result of that, are you seeing themes developing, particularly in innovation in aquaculture?
I think it's the typical ones. All the teams can, in one way or another, be linked to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So you have the welfare below water, and the fish and shrimp welfare or aquaculture welfare becomes much more important these last years. The previous years, there was already a lot of emphasis on the environmental footprint. So I think that's fairly well covered. You have more and more the circularity, circular economy topic, focus on the replacement sources of proteins, and for example, insect proteins for animal feeds. And then a more recent trend is the gene editing or improving genetics, for example, to avoid sea lice resistance, have greater yields from the harvest. So those are, I think, the big trends that we're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, gene editing I find a wonderfully interesting field, particularly in how it integrates with patent rights. Because in some ways, I mean, you're looking at discoveries rather than invention. There's a lot of research being published out there. There's a lot of people working in the field, one of whom, some who may anticipate others. I mean, patent rights are so key to protecting investment and development of new technologies. And a lack of patent rights can nullify the possibility often of advancements. I think it was something which is forgotten by a lot of the parties in the debate on COVID vaccines and whether patent rights should be waived. They forget that often removing these rights will remove the driver for investment. The best story that I always kind of bring up in this area is in relation to penicillin. I think when penicillin was first discovered, details of its potential application for use in medicine were made freely available for the good of the world. The result of this was that nobody had a drive to take that initial application into actually a way that it could be used in treatment. And the only thing that actually what it took to get that over the line there was a war. And the last thing we need, I suppose, is more wars to drive, development in, aquaculture or something.
Let's avoid that, yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think with gene editing, one problem, particularly the medical treatment field, is scale up, where, in the human field, you can edit one gene, but how is that gene then replicated throughout the whole of the human body? In aquaculture, I'm guessing this is less of an issue because you can manipulate things at embryo stage, but, where it seems easy in one area, there will be kind of challenges in other areas. I mean, do you see any specific challenges in things like gene editing, welfare, environment, and taking forward some of this innovation?
Well, I think for the gene editing, apart from all the technical challenges, there's also a challenge on the consumer perception. There's this, genetically modified food, and the appetite for those type of foods isn't the highest. I think we all have our question marks with that, and so I do think it needs to be we have to make efforts to change the public perception, be fully transparent, have discussions around it. So that is, I think that's a particular challenge, yes. And then for the other challenges that we discussed on becoming more sustainable, we often forget that aquaculture is actually very, very diverse. It has different markets with, regional markets, but also different market segments. And what can seem like a great idea in one country, let's say Norway or Scotland, salmon farming, could be a very bad idea in Ecuador or in Indonesia. You also have to, it's the social factor, the nutritional dimension, the environmental side. It's so I think that this is especially a challenge for legislators to take into account. We cannot have a one-size-fits-all approach.
Yeah, I mean, I think the role of governments and legislators is quite significant in this and in other sectors of innovation, whether it be, innovations in communication or human medical treatment or transport or blockchain and cryptocurrency and things like that. And jumping back to one of the challenges in gene editing you mentioned, public perceptions, particularly now, I think, are quite a hurdle to overcome. And the role of politicians leading on those aspects, I think, is very important because, it is not just a market player or a company responsibility. If, the people that are responsible and are trusted with leading a country, should have a role into driving forward and making people understand the benefit of these things. I mean, do you find governments or regulators are helping with innovation, or things like regulation causing issue these days in the operations you're involved in?
Well, regulations on the one hand are very helpful and sometimes can also complicate matters. And where I find that regulatory can be helpful is, for example, in Europe. It's Europe or the US. You have to be sustainable nowadays. If you put something in the water, it has to be a sustainable solution, and that pushes companies to also you do not go for the cheapest solution. While in other countries or other regions, that's not necessarily the case, and when there's no legislation, it's sometimes very difficult to innovate and come with an innovative product. On the other hand, I'm then also thinking if you're as a company, your innovation or your sustainable innovation cannot improve the harvest outcome, for example, then it's maybe also not really meeting the needs of the customer. So it's just a reality. The legislation can help, of course, to accelerate, but in the end, sustainability or innovation has to be linked with profit. Otherwise, it's just missing its point. So that is, as a general comment. And then I would say legislation. I do think there's differences between countries, and we should maybe learn from each other, make regulation not as complex. So agile regulations could be, that's actually a hot topic for the moment at conferences, especially in Scotland. So there is a request to be more like Norway. And Norway has a one-stop shop for regulations. So I know that Scotland would be interested in that. And and it's important, I think, that when you come with innovation, that we have early on consultations with the governments and the regulatory bodies, and that's maybe not always the case now. So there is for sure a way to simplify matters.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. Simplification and an opportunity to communicate with regulators would be very, very welcome. I mean, we're often called to advise upon how regulation applies to very innovative solutions. I often find that we're trying to fit some innovation within the scope of regulation that came up 10, 15 years ago or 5 years ago, when nobody had a clue, that something like this could be done. And that kind of trying to force something within a straitjacket that doesn't really fit is difficult. So, I mean, agility in communication would get around those things. As regards to my I suppose this is a combination of both the kind of commercial operator perception and your understanding of how people operate, but also government. Are you finding certain countries better than others to innovate in?
Not really. I think it's the context is just different, and you as I said, you need to accept the reality of each country, but often what you have in the one country you don't have in the other, but it balances each other out. So I honestly, I think innovation and the need to continuously improve, to improve welfare, that's really a big one globally now. I see in aquaculture really, really pushes innovation throughout the value chain. So I think no, I would say no. I don't think so.
I mean, we used to have a little bit of that kind of perception, of course, working across different areas. If you were doing kind of a software-based business and you wanted to scale it quickly, go and live in Las Vegas or West Coast US. If you're looking at blockchain stuff, go to Berlin. Energy and energy trading, go to Amsterdam. I think one of the few benefits of the pandemic is because of the communication point I mentioned earlier. That grouping has been lost a little, which is nice, and it makes opportunity wider available and innovation for more people. Now, I suppose the next question, and it's more just a perception one, and I know you have people on the ground in Scotland who are probably better able to answer this in detail, but I'm interested in your perspective. How do you see Scotland and the UK fitting into aquaculture innovation comparatively from your overall COO point of view?
No, I think if I just stay in the two European salmon countries, Scotland and Norway, in terms of appetite or the hunger to innovate, I don't see any difference. There is startups, as I say. There's cluster organizations. There's the in both countries the network to innovate is there, and that's what I alluded on before. I think where the the difference is maybe in the ease of the process for regulations can be made more agile in Scotland. But here, I understand from some exchanges also with the team that we can be hopeful that now in the coming year, this independent review that is foreseen, the GRICS review, that might bring some changes into the regulatory framework for Scottish aquaculture, and that would help, with the acceleration of an innovative projects for Scotland as well.
Yeah, and one other question, I think, again, which is particularly applicable to the UK and Scotland, in relation to kind of innovation and your ability to access and to innovate as a cross-border business. It would be wrong for me not to ask, has Brexit had any impact upon what you're doing in that area?
Yeah, well, not as much actually as I think you could expect. Well, first of all, on innovation, no, but for the existing operations, also not really, because of course our raw materials are produced in the UK, and so we're rather lucky on that side. But now again, on the regulatory side, yes, we have our concept has the product that we use for our concept has a market authorization because it's a veterinary medicine, and so we needed to create a new dossier now especially for the UK, because this is no longer covered under the existing market authorization. So that's hours of our team and costs, of course, that we need to spend. But apart from that, there's no real impact. But maybe my team, and I don't know if anyone is present, can comment on that. Maybe I just am too naive on all the work that has gone into this.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a bit of an impact in kind of the life sciences and medical market generally. It's not so much on the ability to innovate, because that is still there within the heads of people that run businesses. It's how difficult it is to actually take that innovation right into the market and generate income through sales. So we now, have a lot of operators in those areas that have double the compliance issues, because they've got to go for authorizations, approvals in the UK and the EU separately. I think you're very lucky to be able to, your supply chains are within the UK for the UK. In relation to supply chains where people have been bringing parts in for goods cross-border, we've seen a lot of complexity there coming up, which people are finding harder to deal with. In one area, which relates to kind of making available of digital materials. I've got a call next week with a client who's having real issues in relation to sales tax, because of all the different ways that they do things from their base here with different countries. So it's a real pain for some people to work through rather than others, But hopefully things will settle down.
No, but you're right. Now that you bring it up, also on our European funding, our partner is UK based, and indeed there were some question marks on can we actually benefit from European funding still as a UK, and these things where no one had a real answer on it. And it's true that everything comes a bit more complex. Hopefully that's what's out.
We've seen a slight, I suppose, development in where countries people are interested in, coming into Scotland and going from Scotland outwards generally. We see a lot more interest in the UK from the US, particularly. That's been something which has grown up significantly since Brexit. When one expands from one country into another, the first thing they often do is get their IP rights sorted in the country they're going into. Huge growth in instructions coming in for registration in the UK from the US. So that's something which we've noticed. And then as regards the UK kind of looking outwards, we've seen a bit of a drop off in China. we've seen a bit of a drop off in relation to the EU, but I suppose strong uplifts in relation to the US, as mentioned, but also Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. There seems to be, and maybe it's just my perception from the way things are working, a bit of a kind of focus shifting back to, I suppose, traditional Commonwealth English-speaking countries in a certain way, you know. But we do live in a fast-changing world, so you know, things one week to the next can make a big difference. We had one chemicals business that we work with who had significant issues because a lot of their raw material has been traditionally manufactured in Ukraine. You know, if you'd asked them at the start of the year whether they would have problems with that just now, they'd probably guessed no. But look where we are at this point in time. So, yeah, so I mean, I think it's more than ever, it's an interesting, innovative, people are still innovating, but the market, as in a lot of other areas, is complex and fast changing, more so than ever. That's probably the best way to sum it up. Now, I'm conscious we're getting towards the end of our allotted timescale, and I'd like to kind of open the floor out to questions coming in from the attendees. To kick things off, I've got one for myself. So simply a webinar is always a great chance to meet new people. Is there any particular type of business that may be listening that you would like to meet?
Well, I think in general, we are all in this together. If we want to, because we Aquapharma are relatively, quite far away from the consumer. We are, our customers are the fish farmers or the shrimp farmers, and you've mentioned that, Jamie. If the true challenge is changing consumer perspective, not just for the gene editing, but in general, you know, consumers are confused. So I think this is where, you know, we are interested. The European funding project for Greece is one thing. That network is really helpful in working on a narrative and bringing transparency and facts in changing that perspective. But any company that is interested in collaborating on reassuring consumers that the fish we eat is actually sustainably farmed, those are really interesting connections to have, because we have to do this together.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. You mentioned specifically their European funding and European projects. I've been involved in at least a couple of hundred of these over the course of my career. I'm older than I look, so it's not as impressive as it sounds. But I've always found them a great way to interact with people in other countries and to build good consortia, both of industry and academia, to come up with some really, really useful solutions. Over the growth, I started first working with the framework program 5, I think it was, right up through to where we are now with Horizon and EIT. The focus now on actually helping participants find routes to market has been, it's much more than there has ever been before, you know, and that it's a wonderful thing to see that focus and support for actually taking great ideas into the marketplace, which benefits everybody. So yeah, I fully agree. I mean, on the European side of things, and collaboration generally is a great thing if you're looking to innovate, you know. Okay, do we have any further questions coming in? We'll give that a couple of seconds. We don't have anything just yet, so I'm assuming everybody has enjoyed this as much as I have today, but I would like to extend my thanks for taking time out your very busy day, Hannah, and joining us for this chat. I hope everybody has enjoyed it, and I hope to see you again next year. Brilliant. Excellent. Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.